I got a question.
Yes.
If you already have it download, how do you change the environment setting even if it's already downloaded?
That is a good question. Let me get mine open here. And I'll need to switch over to it. Can you see my Visual Studio now?
Yes.
Go ahead and just choose continue without code. And then the environment, it's under tools, options, and I think it's under here under environment. And they keep moving this stuff around. And don't see it there.
It's under environment general at the top, sir.
It is under general? I just missed it then. I thought it was there, but where is it? Well, that's your color theme, but she's asking for the environment, which is where you choose desktop or.
No, I was actually talking about the color theme.
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, there's the color scheme right there. There is a place where you can change if you chose a different development environment. Like I say, I don't think it really impacts your choices. When you get to that first screen that you just saw a moment ago there, I don't know if I can get back to it or not. Start window. There we go. This comes up, and if you choose create a new project, which why don't we just have everybody do that now? Go ahead and open up your Visual Studio. And when you get to that first screen here, we want to choose the create a new project option.
So when you click on create a new project, you can have any thing you needed for it, for the project?
Yeah, that'll take you to a screen where you choose, it tells you here, you're going to choose a project template with code scaffolding to get started, meaning that you'll have a project type in a certain language then that you're going to identify, and also some files that get created for you automatically that help support the whole compile process and testing and debugging your code and things of that nature. So let's just have everybody looking at this screen now.
Yep.
Then click on create a new project. And now you can see you have these choices. It defaults to the C# Visual Basic choices for console app, .NET Core. So when it comes to frameworks, Microsoft has always had what they call the .NET framework. And then recently, about 2-3 years ago, they updated it to a newer, more efficient framework. And so that newer framework is called the .NET Core. And it's the .NET Core framework that gives us that advantage that I was mentioning to you earlier, and you can see in the description here, that we can actually write code once and then have it run on the different operating systems listed there, Windows, Linux, and Mac OS. So this one would not support, actually let me do it for C# here. This one would not support iOS, but there is another tool that we can add to Visual Studio called Xamarin. And Xamarin lets me write code that can also be exported then to Android and iOS devices. But we're focusing on desktops right now, so this is the choice we're going to make. C#, .NET Core, so C# being the language, .NET Core, meaning that's the framework we'll be able to access from this template. And the style of program as opposed to a Forms app. So a Forms app would be more like a graphical display where you would have like little inputs and buttons and things of that nature. So in the first level class, we just do console apps. It's much easier to understand the code from that perspective, I think. So 2 things here. We're going to use the C# language, and then the template type, actually 3 things. So C#'s the language, console app is the application type, and then .NET Core is the library that we want to have available. So as long as
Will
that's
we
your,
be,
go ahead.
well, we'll be using the console app.net core a lot in this class?
Pretty much exclusively, yes. Is that a problem?
No, I was just wondering.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's primarily we'll be using that. We'll show you a little bit of JavaScript a little bit later on. You have to load up a web development environment to be able to demonstrate the JavaScript, because we're not running any type of a JavaScript interpreter on here otherwise. So we'll show you how to do that as well. But yes, primarily it's going to be console app C# .NET Core. If you type in, just to kind of complete that thought, if we were to type in like just C# up here, you see we get all the different C# project types. And in addition then to the .NET Core, now you can see here's a core web application. Here's a Blazor app. That's a newer front-end language that they use in web development. Let me type in C# console, because what I really want you to see is here's the difference on the framework. So we're not going to be using the older framework, which is the .NET framework, but you can see that's still a template that's available here. We're always going to be using the .NET Core. So this one here actually didn't give me C#.NET. It's got to be in this list here somewhere. No, that's interesting. I don't know why we don't see that. I got C++ console. I had not noticed that. But, oh, there we go. Right there is the very top one. So .NET Core, that's what we're going to be using as far as our library, not the .NET framework. Trying to think, in the programs that we're going to write, it really wouldn't make any difference, because the core, it's almost redundant using that word, but their core code for the framework is really the same in both of those, and it'll run on both systems, and the syntax, everything's going to look at the same. When you cut and paste your code or copy and paste your code into Canvas as your assignments, that code will look exactly the same whether you did it with the .NET Core or the .NET framework. It's just that it's actually using the newer library depending on which one you choose here. So everybody at this point should have C# selected, console app, .NET Core. That should be your highlighted template. Now we click next down here in the bottom of this dialog box. We'll give it a name. We'll call it our first project. Might want to make a note to yourself. This is where Microsoft has their code. As you create these new projects, this is where the code files will be actually stored for you on your storage device. So the default is your root drive, which is usually the C drive, your users folder, whatever your username is, then source, and then repos. And if I were to go to my repos folder right now, in that source folder, I would actually see the contents of my first project as soon as I click create down here. The other thing too that you should understand about Visual Studio is that a project is an individual program that you're writing, and it's very likely that you're going to want to write multiple projects to be able to create your application. And so all your projects are organized into what's called a solution. So you see at the very bottom, it's actually the same name. As I typed in first project for my project name, then the Visual Studio just typed in that same name for me as the solution. Now, if I wanted to change that, if I was going to have, I'm creating a mega program here, and this is just going to be the first project in my mega program, then the project name would be first project, and the solution name would be mega program. So when I went into that repos directory that we just talked about here, the parent folder in repos would be called mega program. And then inside of the mega program folder would be another folder called first project, and that's where all the code files, the source code files, would be for that specific project. So solutions are just a way of organizing multiple projects into a single folder, a single solution, as they call it in Microsoft world. As a developer, that's what they refer to us as. We're solution developers. Right? We're looking at a problem, we're trying to come up with a digital solution. So more than likely, down the road, you'll be creating multiple projects. In fact, when we do some of these demos, I'll have you create multiple projects within a single solution. So for now, just first project as your name, doesn't really matter the solution name. Go ahead and click Create in the lower right. Okay, and so Visual Studio now, based on the instructions that we gave it there, loaded up the template for a C# console application, and it's supported by, if you look at these dependencies over here, the .NET Core framework. So you can see right there, Microsoft.NET Core .app. So that's just the parent name for the code that we'll be utilizing here within our program. Our actual program code is this file right here, program.cs. If you look at your tab right over here, how it has the title, program.cs. So all of your C# programs by default, the first source code file that you want to run within the project needs to be named program.cs, because that's how Visual Studio is set up. When we go to test our code, it's going to look for a program.cs file and then follow the instructions in that file. And that file may then point to other files. We won't have that at our level of the course. But when you get into higher level courses, you'll have to create separate what they call class files and then utilize those class files within your main program file. So we'll take a quick look at the basic code that it gives us here. So again, we're using the .NET library, which is thousands and thousands of pre-written blocks of code for us in these format that I referred to, the class format. And so the kind of most commonly used component of that framework is the system library, because the system library contains a lot of the code files that are for basic system operations, like the console object. It's very common, as you can imagine, in a console application that you need to use a console object to be able to, display values to the screen and also to take values input from your users as well. So that is called a directive. If you were in C++ world, they call that a preprocessor directive. So what we're really doing is we're telling the compiler, hey, you need to go and get access to this code and have it ready in memory so that when you go to process the code I've written, as I call on these different elements from that library, then the compiler will be immediately able to grab that code and utilize it as necessary to run our code, to process our code. Then, as I also mentioned to you earlier, C# specifically was written for an object-oriented environment, and so they organized the actual program coding structure into the format you would expect to find in an object-oriented environment. So, for instance, the system, which is a library in the .NET framework, .NET Core framework, as well as .NET framework, that basically is a way of grouping multiple classes together in a program. So the namespace needs to be unique within the whole entire program that we're using. Like anytime that I want to write some code and I want it to apply to the program that's written here, I'll have to put that code inside of that same namespace, the first project. Then inside your namespace, again, in an object-oriented environment, they organize the classes into the namespaces. So that's kind of like a subdivision of the namespace. Then, so console, for instance, in the system namespace is the actual class file. And it's the class file that is the blueprint that has all the code in it that represents the functionality of what a console should be able to do. So the console is the class here, and that class is inside of an outer class called program. And so it's, again, the program, the namespace, I should say the class name needs to match what we have here in the file name. That's, again, the compiler's way of knowing which is the first line of code to run. And we only have one file in here that could actually be run. But if you had multiple files, it'll always look for program.cs, and so your class also wants to be program. That stuff is always going to be done for you every time you create a new project. So I just need you to be aware of the format structure. You will not on your own be writing that structure. We are always going to be working down here. So in a class, they have methods, properties, and events. So what we're looking at in here is for the class program, it has a main method, and that's true of all C# programs, whether they be console apps or even what they call form apps, which is the graphical interface. So everything runs inside of main. So once the compiler says, okay, I know I need to load program.cs up into memory. Now when I go to start processing, I'm going to look for the main method because I know that that's where the first line of code that I'm going to run is going to be. So the first line inside of main is always the first line of code that runs in any C# program. In this case, we only have one line of code, so that's the only code that can run. So here's our actual statement then at this point. So notice the format here. Again, this is going to be created for you. The method main, it'll always be created for you. It'll always be static void main. I won't go into any great detail there yet. And it'll also allow for arguments to be passed to it. Don't worry about any of that. Just know that that structure will be there. Then the curly braces designate which statements are part of that main method. So when the compiler says, okay, I need to fire off the main method, then it knows I got to go inside the curly braces and start from the very first line, the very first statement, run that code, and then the next statement, and on within main. And then we may have calls to other functions in here or other methods in here. We could just say my method, parentheses, semicolon. So that would be actually a call then to another method that I would create outside of this called static void my method, and then inside of there I could put my own blocks of code that I would want to have run over and over again anytime within the program I call that method. So I'd have various statements in here that would do different stuff. But that's a little to, getting down the road there ahead of what we're going to be actually doing for our first assignment. Our first assignment is just simply creating this project, I need to see that everybody can create a basic C# project, and the Microsoft or Visual Studio writes out the statement that you need, the assignment. The only change here, just want to see that you can actually change text in the right place in your code. So you'll type in hello universe instead of the default hello world. I think I mentioned this in class, but I'll remind you again, if I look at the title up here, the tab that has the title of my file that's open, program.cs, now I see an asterisk there. The asterisk is indicating I've made a change to the code. So once I click save, you'll see that asterisk goes away. So now I know that that code has been changed. Then to run the code, I like the shortcut Control F5, but you can also access it here from this debug menu. You'll see that we have start debugging or start without debugging. So at this point, we don't need to debug our code. We're not troubleshooting problems within our code. We just want to see it run. So that's why I use that shortcut, Control F5, when we're running our code. So you can click here to do it, or you can just, from your keyboard, hold down the Control key and then press Function key 5 on the keyboard. So that should then compile the code into the intermediary language. Then my operating system has the CLR necessary to process that intermediary language. So it processed my code, my intermediate code there, and then generated the final output in a console object or in a console window, hello universe. Does any of that make sense?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Anybody need any other explanation there? Anything, any questions that are left looming?
I don't.
I just had a question about what project template we were supposed to select for the C# section.
Okay, so let me go back to my start window. We clicked on create new project. Oh, what happened here? Visual Studio's freaking on me. There we go. So create a new project. And then in this version of Visual Studio, I believe that the C# console app .NET Core is always the first one in the list.
Oh, okay. I have an old version. That's why I probably just have to
Well, if
uninstall
not,
and reinstall.
what you need to do is put in there C# console and then that should bring up the console app. And then just the only specific thing here is there's two types. There's the .NET Core and the .NET Framework. We're always going to use the .NET Core.
Okay.
Or you can go under all languages and type, not type,
Oh,
but go to
Yeah, good.
C thing and then just type console at the top of the search.
Yeah, so
All
you've
right.
got those little drop downs. So there's C# I'm choosing, and then all platforms, and then console. So again, it gives me console app. .NET Core is the default one there, and it is using the C# language. Notice the icons, right? So the hashtag is C# as opposed to obviously VB's Visual Basic. The ++ is for C++. The JS would be for JavaScript. So we're always going to be, for the assignments, we're always going to be working in C# console app .NET Core.
All right, awesome. I just was a little bit confused because I already
problem.
have I had Visual Studio from a previous class, so I just have to delete it and reinstall it, I guess.
15?
I think it was 2017.
Okay. Well, there is the .NET Core is in 2017. That was the first time they added it, I believe.
Yeah, I was able to find it still. I just didn't recognize the user interface.
Yeah, it is a little different. Yeah. Microsoft loves to change everything. Keep us on our toes.
Windows 7 to Windows 10 was great.
Yeah. Well, now they seem to have a designation of what was I seeing the other day? They've got version 10, but they were putting some designation after it because we got this new update here. I think it was last month that actually was a pretty major change to the operating system. We didn't see it really visually, but from behind the scenes, apparently they did some major upgrades.
Very
So
nice.
once you go ahead.
I was just saying, nice.
Once the project's open and you've got your console write line statement there for you. So again, I think you should start at least knowing those basic components there. So again, the console is the class, and then all classes have 3 different types of data inside of them. They have the properties for the class, they have the methods for the class, and then the events that the class supports. So in this case, console has a write line method. That means that we anything that we put in the parentheses and in quotes there, and it doesn't always have to be in quotes. If I had like a variable that I want to extract the value from that variable, I could just type the variable name in there without a quote, without the quotes around it. So we'll get into data types in a little bit, but this is what we call a string value. Anytime that you put quotes around text, that means that it should interpret it as just characters as opposed to some sort of a mathematical operation or something like that. So the final thing that you need to do now then is to go ahead and submit it into Canvas. So let me go back now. Well, actually, let's do this first. Let's do the highlight me first so that we'll have the code ready to paste into Canvas. So what we're going to do is just make a copy then of everything here that we've got in our code. Just select it all. I like the keyboard shortcuts. So I'll do Control-C for copy. So that's now sitting up on my clipboard in memory so I can paste it elsewhere. Now let me get the web browser open. And in my web browser, let me share it with you. Okay, so you should now be able to see my web browser. So let me get back into your course here, 111B, and then I'll open up a new tab and I'll just type in that tab. Highlight, so HILITE.ME. So this is just a website that we can put source code into, and what it'll do is it'll convert it to HTML code for us and give us a nice colorful looking output, kind of like what you're seeing right now in the Visual Studio source code editor there. So remember, I copied all that code from my program.cs file. So now what I'm going to do is come over here to the Highlight Me web page, and where it says source code, I'm going to go ahead and paste my source code in there. Didn't copy very well, did it? Sometimes that happens, so I'll go back and copy it again. Let's try pasting it again. There we go. So I've taken the source code from Visual Studio, copied it. Now I come in here and I pasted it over the text that was there. Below that box, I need to identify the language I put in there. So we want to choose C#. Should be alphabetical here. C#, there it is, C#. And at this point, I wouldn't worry about changing the style that's going to be applied to your code. You could go in here and create the custom styling if you want to, and I don't recommend that at this point. Just leave the style selected there as colorful. That'll be fine.
Would you like to have it line numbers?
Yeah, I think the line number works good because when we get a little bit more code going here, if I need to identify errors to you, it's easier if I identify it by line number. So I pasted my source code into the source code window. Down below, I've selected the language C#. I put the check in the box that reads line numbers, and then I'm going to go ahead now and click on the button right under that checkbox that reads highlight. And you'll see now down in this preview is where I'm going to get a representation of what that code's going to look like. You don't, let me emphasize that, you do not copy the preview. What you want to copy is in this HTML box right here. So all this code right here, when you click in there, I believe it just does an automatic select all for you. So now that everything is selected, we'll go ahead, do a Control-C there to copy that HTML code. So remember now, we've converted our source code really into a different format. This code really wouldn't be runnable if we went and pasted it back in our source code editor. But this code works really good in Canvas. So what we need to do is go back to our course shell now. Click on the assignments link. And then we have assignment 1 as the first link there. We'll click on that. Let's see, I got to be in student view here. Hold on. Okay, so let me go back again. So assignments, assignment 1, and you'll see now I'm in student view. I get the same red button you get up here. So there's the big red button, submit assignment. So we go ahead and click on that button, submit assignment. It takes us to this editor where you're going to paste your code, but don't paste it right there because right now you're just in text mode. What we need to do is go over to
the HTML editor.
Right, so go over to the right there where you see it says HTML editor, click on that. That switches it now so that it'll accept the HTML code and process it correctly. So now that I'm in the HTML editor, now I'll go ahead and paste my HTML code right there.
And then you switch it back and then push submit.
If you want to review it, you don't have to, but yeah, you could go back now to the I think that's probably a good idea, right? To double check it, go back to the rich code editor and it should show you what you see on my screen now, the line numbers to the left, the color coded code to the right. And so now all we have to do is click submit assignment.
I got a question.
And then just let me finish up with the thought here. So up in the upper right-hand corner, you can see that Canvas has accepted the assignment. And if I want to go back and review it, I can click on submission details and it'll take me back to the actual assignment that I submitted. Go ahead, ask your question.
Would you want it to, when we send it, would you want it to have it in picture form or in the HTML editor form?
Oh, absolutely HTML, yes. No, I don't like graphics because I can't copy that code and test it out in my editor if I need to.
Okay.
In this class, generally not necessary. As we get into the other classes, when you get really complicated code, we a lot of times just need to copy and paste that into our editor so that we can run it and see that it's going to run okay.
I had a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So just to make sure I heard this right, so we copy and paste the code back in the Canvas. We click HTML editor, and that's where we paste in the code for the assignment.
Correct.
Okay.
If you like, I'll just hit the resubmit button here and just go through the steps again. So here's the editor. Once you click on the submit button, it's in the text entry mode. Actually, that doesn't seem to change, but you'll notice on the right, you have the option of an HTML editor. So if it's showing HTML editor, you're not in the HTML editing mode, right?
Oh, okay.
Okay, so you just click on HTML editor. Now it reads rich content editor. That means that if you click there, it'll change you back to the rich content editor. But now you're in HTML mode at that point. That's where I paste my HTML code. And then the suggestion was go back to the rich content editor. That's a good idea. So you can just verify visually that everything looks correct. And then you just click submit down at the bottom. And you're good to go.
All right, cool. Thank you.
Any other questions? Because we're about out of time.
The only question I had was, so I submitted everything and it says exactly as your screen that it's late. Will you be fixing that late assignment or?
It's saying late? Oh,
Yeah,
huh, I thought I had. Let me get out of student view here.
just because it says that it's due by April 2nd.
Is it? I thought I changed those. I apologize. Let me just get back. This is assignment 1. Let's edit it and change it to the 9th. There's how easy that is.
Sure you've done it to change the dates to all of them as well. Just double check while you're doing that.
I guess I'll have to go back and do that when I get some time today. I got another class after you guys, but when I get done this afternoon, I can do that. But just be aware that the syllabus is your Bible, right? The dates that are there are correct, and that's
Okay.
if I if I forget or whatever, have a mistake in them, just realize the syllabus is correct.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Man, I'm getting all kinds of messages now. All right, anybody, anything else?
No, sir.
All right, well, we're going to get out of here. We'll meet again in this same format on Thursday, starting at 8 o'clock. Okay?
Okay, thank you, sir.
And apparently, I think I have recorded this, so the second half anyway, I should be able to get posted. Once I do get that posted, I'll send out the link for everybody in the class.
Okay, cool.
All right, thank you, everybody.
Bye.
See you on Thursday. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.